My name is Charles Bryson, Director of the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency, under the auspices of Mayor Lyda Crewson, and your host. Playing as the theme, and we do not own the rights to the music, is After Hours by Ronnie Jordan. And this podcast can be seen at Facebook Live and recorded at mycitymymusic.com. Today, we have several people to discuss coding, algorithm, and artificial intelligence, what they are and what they mean as a part of your life. Welcome all.
Thank you.
So we're going to start off real quickly with names. So starting to my left. And affiliations, if you'd like.
Sure. Name, Lashana Lewis. I am the CEO of Ellum Lewis Consulting, which is a diversity and IT consulting firm. I'm also affiliated with LaunchCode. LaunchCode was kind of the catapult for me to get into the IT business. So you'll see the shirt that I'm wearing today. That is the LaunchCode logo. But yeah, so that's pretty much a little bit about me. I've been a computer geek pretty much my entire life, and I was grateful that a program was able to kind of push me forward into that region. But I'm sure we'll get a little bit into diversity and tech while we're talking throughout the subject.
Yeah, we will.
Good morning. My name is Trina Clark James. I'm the Regional Director for Empower. Empower is a national nonprofit based out of New York City. It's been here in St. Louis for about 3 years now, and our main goal is to close the tech skills gap. So we provide free IT training to young adults from under-resourced communities, really just trying to help support them in launching and advancing within digital or IT careers.
And Empower is actually an N and then power afterwards.
Exactly.
And you're based at Harris-Stowe State University?
We have our flagship site is at Harris-Stowe State University, and we also have our first kind of extension site is in the Harrison Center, the William J. Harrison Center across from Bashan High School.
Thank you. Finally?
Good morning. I'm Jake Hertenstein. I'm also a certifiable nerd, and I've been in the tech industry for about 10 years, a couple of degrees from Missouri S&T, and I also volunteer with a couple of organizations like the Mastodon Fair in Jefferson County. That's the largest art and science fair in the nation, and First Robotics as well.
The what?
Mastodon Fair.
Like Mastodon as in a mastodon?
So we used to be associated with the Mastodon Park. It's now its own organization, so it's called the Mastodon Fair. And it's a K through 12 science fair organization.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So we're going to start at the very basic and beginning because I figured it's the easiest way to do this. So what's coding? What does that mean?
When I think of coding, I just think it's...
Or what is another way to phrase that? What is a code?
What is a code? Code is basically a language. So what you're doing whenever you're coding a computer, you're using a language that the computer can understand to relay whatever information you want to that computer. So basically the same thing as talking. When we're talking to each other, we have to use a language that the other person understands. And coding is basically the same thing, except for we're using that for a computer.
And when you... So that's done by a person.
That is done by a person.
We will call for the simplicity of
for right now, yes, it's done by a person.
Right. And so I want to go back to my high school decades ago when they had all the little cards. Is that what we were doing? We were actually coding or programming something to do something else?
Yeah, it's very similar to when we write letters to loved ones. Like back in the day when people actually wrote letters and sent them through the mail, you would use a piece of paper to write down using code, which is, words and symbols that represent letters and et cetera and so forth. And then you would take that and ship it to the person. So with computers back in the day, when you had the little punch cards, that's basically writing a letter to that computer and saying, "Dear computer, please do these following operations." And the computer would translate that into whatever it is that you asked it to do and then perform those particular tasks.
Jump in whenever you all want.
Yeah.
Who codes?
Who codes?
Is there a training? Is there just a geek nerd knows how to learn how to do that? Do you need special schooling, etc.?
Pretty much anyone who's interested in it can code. Coding is usually done by a human being. I mean, there is some AI, and we'll get into that later, that can create code. But for the most part, it's anyone. It's anyone who's interested in learning how to talk to a computer. So,
computers talk to each other, whatever.
Yeah. Because, just really still emphasizing the fact that coding is just a language. So if someone wants to go off and say, I want to move to Spain and work there, you would learn the Spanish language. Or if you want to move to Italy, you would learn Italian. So anyone who is interested in understanding the way that computers work, they basically speak in a language like the binary language, you would just pick that up the same way that you would pick up what we would normally think of as a foreign language. And then I would also say someone who really wants to get into programming needs to almost kind of enjoy mysteries, because a lot of coding comes down to you say, this is what I want you to do. And you program something, and then if it doesn't work, you have to almost kind of be like a sleuth, like a detective, to try to figure out, okay, where did something go wrong? Let me kind of, do trial and error, kind of pick apart things in order to figure out, this is what I intended for this computer to do, or for these computers to do together. This is what they did. That is not what I intended for them to do. So you have to have a lot of patience and want to kind of be a sleuth that does some detective work to figure out why it did not do that and what you need to change. Because at the end of the day, technology is responding to what we're telling it to do, and how we program it or kind of give it guidance to do. So
I know. So one of my all-time favorite movies is 2001, and I remember that conversation about and this is way past what I should be talking about now, but how computers, I'll use that phrase, learn what you're doing, and therefore they're able to not only do what you've programmed it to, but the theory is that a computer can learn various things to do past what you've given it the information. Is that, how true is that?
But I think that still comes back to, it's using logic that still is rooted in human beings teaching it a certain logic. So,
and then, that goes into the artificial intelligence area. So
I knew I was way past where I should.
No, it's okay. These conversations go really fast and really far.
Just like technology moves really fast.
Yes. So artificial intelligence, that's what you're talking about, where a computer is starting to get examples from what we give it and say, okay, well, I want you to try to figure out what to do based off the examples that I gave you. So it's kind of going into that territory.
And a classic example, I would argue, is the chess match between a human and a computer, where you've programmed it you programmed it based on what previous people have done, so they know all the moves, and then they're learning as they're against a real live human being.
Right.
That seems to be the model, if you will, for artificial intelligence.
But it's important to
go ahead.
Sorry that I've heard about artificial intelligence. It's been said that it's doing what hasn't been done before. And so we may not explicitly write code to do something, but we are going to write the code that the computer can then sort of learn from a data set and do something better than we were able to do before.
I would just add, though, it's important to understand it's still bound by rules, and that logic piece is key. And so while technology, computers, artificial intelligence as the means for it to do this can do things it wasn't explicitly told to do, it still has to be within the confines of what a human told it, like your boundaries. And so that's the part that still needs to be influenced by people.
Yeah.
Right.
Ultimately, computers can only do what the code tells the processor to do. I think the best example for what is computer code is to look back to a player piano. And that recent TV show, Westworld, I thought was a beautiful example of that embedded amidst this huge AI world. And they were kind of illustrating that, like, it's really just running a computer code. And so in the case of a player piano, you've got a drum or a paper card or something that describes all the notes that should be played. It's taking that as an input. There's not really a lot of processing or logic that's going on, but it's sending those notes straight out to the piano strings as sound.
Okay.
So that's kind of a basic computer and code too.
So I think I'm good on coding.
Yeah.
What's an algorithm?
Taking inputs, processing some logic that's defined again by code, and generating a desired output. That's probably the simplest way to describe that.
But how do you get from a code to an algorithm? What's the...
It's kind of more like a set of instructions that you give the computer to do. So whenever you're creating an algorithm, the code itself is like little bits and pieces of it, but putting them together, stringing them together is an algorithm. So you're saying, okay, I want you to take this red cup and pick it up, and then I want you to put it on this table, and then I want you to fill it up with... That's all part of an algorithm. You're telling it what to do, all while, each individual thing that I just said is part of the code. So you're basically kind of giving those instructions to the computer and letting it run all the way through and do the entire process until the end, whenever you say that end is over.
Imagine you have to describe to a 10-year-old how to take the trash out.
Exactly.
That process of defining exactly how they need to do it. Not mine, but that's the algorithm approach, that you have to define that process in a very explicit way.
So an algorithm is, I am telling something to do something and the process for which I want it to be done.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yeah.
Yes. And you usually use code to do that because sometimes the computer doesn't know how to speak like us quite yet. I mean, they're working on it. But we still have to use the language that the computer understands, which is the code, in order to get it to perform the algorithm.
Because at the end of the day, even when we talk to Siri is not necessarily hearing the English language or French, or it's still there's a translation that's happening kind of behind the scenes that we're just not necessarily paying attention to. So it's translating it to what computers understand, and we always have to kind of come back to that. Coding is just the language. So kind of another example I was going to share, probably oversimplifying this too much, is if we kind of stick with that. It's a language, and so if I want to become a chef in Italy, I not only need to learn the Italian language in order to communicate with people, but for me to read a recipe and be able to follow that recipe, I need to understand that I'm going to be in Italy. The recipes are all going to be in Italian, and I'm going to need that understanding of that language in order to follow the recipe. Computers, they need to be given their recipes in the binary language, and so that's what algorithms are. Basically, now you're giving them actual instructions.
Right.
You don't just understand their language so you can say, hi, computer. Right. You're actually giving them instructions on this is what you need to be doing.
It might be worth noting that there's a lot of different languages for computer programming, starting at the binary level. That is the most complex, and hardly anybody ever wants to spend an amount of time at that level.
Unless you like ones and
right. But so there are abstraction layers above that in terms of higher level programming languages that make it easier and faster to develop those algorithms and ultimately complete applications. So there's a lot of complexity just within the languages.
So I'll give you all a little bit of a plug for a minute as I set up my next set of questions. What is launch code?
What is launch code? Launch code, they usually don't use the word boot camp, but it's a learning school where you can actually learn how to code, what code is, as well as what algorithms are, how to use those. And you eventually to the point where you can program a computer to do whatever it is that you want the computer to do. The cool thing about launch code is that they look for more non-traditional students. So people who don't necessarily have a background in computers, didn't go to school for computers, for instance, but maybe you want to make a life switch or a life change. So it could be somebody, deciding, I've always been interested in computers, but, I'm 26 years old. Is it too late for me? Absolutely not. Whenever you want to start is the perfect time. So what launch code does is that they kind of root out those people who have a genuine interest, try to scale them up to have a job within the tech world. So right now, I know there's hundreds of thousands of jobs that are left empty because we don't have people with tech skills that are available to fill them. And Launch Code tries to help with that gap. So for me, I always be a career since I was a kid. Since I was when I was 10 years old, and that was the old Commodore 64. I didn't say that. Usually I'm the Commodore 64 fans. So it was my first foray into computers, but never anything like formal for me to go through. Living low income, poverty in Illinois, where most people didn't make more than 15, $20 a year as a family. So having the access was really hard, and I got it whenever I could. I did have a program when I was in high school, but again, unless you have the resources to be able to kind of support that, it's kind of learn, and then it's like there's nowhere to actually apply those skills. So, I did go to college, I didn't finish. That kind of put me out of the whole the area to be able to actually excel in the technology world and actually have a tech job. So I was just for a long time because qualifications back then were you had to have a 4-year degree. I had to have a 4-year degree. So eventually with the creation of a program like Launch Code, I found out about it and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to take an instant thing that I don't need a 4-year degree to get a tech job. Let me test them out. I actually started in June of 2014. By August 2014, they found out that I already knew how to program, that I didn't need to learn what coding was and all of that. I actually got my first interview at Microsoft as an apprentice. So I worked there from August to November as an apprentice, and I was hired on full time in November 2014. So Launch Code kind of set up my experience in the tech world, and I actually worked at Microsoft for about 2 years as a systems engineer. So basically, the huge servers that you see in TV shows where somebody's going back and it's a room with all the computers actually fixing them, putting parts like that in there for the last about a year. Where I was a software engineer, so I was the person looking at code, trying to figure out why your credit card actually didn't have it. Yeah.
Is both like and different from Launch Code in a lot of ways. Like, a lot on just environment and the community on also is another code. I talk about it as being earlier in the pipeline of someone who is looking to get into technology. So we are first on working with 18 to 25-year-olds who have at least a high school diploma or equivalent to GED or a high set. Because we're trying to find untapped and we know or in some of those stress communities without having the opportunity of financial or other factors to go to college 4 years and a degree. We don't want them to be able to be able to have a digital economy. So we're looking specifically for 18 and 25-year-olds with at least a high school diploma or equivalent to buy down skills and kind of foundational IT skills on your hardware, software, specifically OS, and focuses on those 10, as well as networking. So we have to look at the core of what IT is, so that they can at least start the reviews. Typically, as a help desk analyst or as a PC technical support, or as a system integrator, or ensuring that you're able to with value tracks or data, what is because they don't make sure it's safe or the hardware themselves because the computer directly understands what it's from them. So the process for weeks or 17 weeks, they are meaning for skills, as well as soft skills. We really focus on their development as well. And then last 7 weeks are out on internships in a variety of organizations. And these start giving practical application of the skills learning in the classroom. And also, like I said, is for them to come out of our program and be able to launch their career, and then over time continue to advance within a technology career, whether it's going into coding, programming, could be going into cybersecurity, could be going into network engineering, could be going into data science, like all the data that all this was created for, to mine. So Empower really is just kind of an earlier step, particularly for young adults from communities where it's not always been available to them.
Empower's, let me get it wrong, but I want to say 5 different locations nationwide.
So we were at 6 until next week. Actually, we'll be starting our 7th region in Detroit, Michigan. But based in New York City, also in Dallas, the Bay Area, Jersey City, Newark, New Jersey, Baltimore, before then coming to St. Louis. And now we're about to launch in Detroit.
Okay. Jake, I'll give you your chance in just a minute.
Sure.
So the reason I wanted to have a little bit of that background is we're getting close to talking about not only what coding is and means, and not only what algorithms mean, but artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so I will say this, both of you can deny it, it'll be fine. Part of the reason that the programs that you are part of started with because of African Americans in those particular industry. Would that be fair?
That's fair, yes.
The part of that is there's the realization that coding occasionally goes awry, not necessarily on purpose, but on accident when you get to the and asking to do things. We've been in, I'll say the code written or the effect that has on a block. So that being said, do you believe that you are on the right track with the teaching? Because this is only for American and
whenever formally touched, like we talk about young all the time, especially the young they were born and they were handed tablets. So they've been sitting up there playing their PS2 and making sure, I don't even know if there is a PS2, but
I think there was.
And making sure that they've been fixing it because they can afford to get, the PS4, but they don't realize, so you've already had to understand what a video card was when your video went out, and now you can't see your game anymore. So, but to your point, there hasn't been as much formal education, so you don't know how to
so this is really a push to get African Americans and young African Americans into a field that seems to be expanding by the minute.
Yeah, and there's this innate fear. Like a lot of times I end up talking to, especially women of color, especially black women, and they'll say, for instance, one woman said, well, you know what I'd like to do when I can't sleep at night? I go online and I find apps from the App Store, and I download them and I look at the code and I try to break it down and I try to make it do something different. But you know what? I'm not a coder. I'm not a technologist. And I literally was on a panel with this woman saying this to me in the audience, and I grabbed the microphone from the person that had it on the panel, and I said, "You just described a coder to me. That's what you are. That's what you do." And she's like, "But I'm not sitting down in the basement, in my mom's house with a hoodie on, and I like talking to people, and I don't want to be that type of person." And I said, I talk to people too. I'm sitting here talking to you, but I'm still a coder. And it's kind of just this mystery that they have where they just think, I have a certain way in order to do this. this profession, and I'm like, no, that's, you get stereotypes. They have stereotypes on TV and radio and everywhere, but that is just kind of the more exaggerated version of what that person is. That's not, what every person is in that profession. That's not what that looks like. So I kind of had to keep at her to kind of get into her that, a coder is someone that's interested. You have that passion, to get started. It's just that you think that because you don't look or you didn't come from a particular area or a particular background, then that must not be you. So that's another thing that I've been fighting. And I've talked to a lot of Black women who told me similar things, breaking down databases or reprogramming something. And they said, well, I did it that one time. That doesn't mean I'm a coder. And I'm like, it does.
Yeah.
You're certainly touching on the culture issue here.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say also kind of from the opposite side, not just for the individuals who before didn't see this as a pathway for them, and so
Right.
they've been left out, but also for the companies, society. Like if you don't have those diverse perspectives, I mean, if all you have is one way, and so it's not about there's a bad way and a good way, or there's something wrong with the way that it has been, but it's very narrow and just representing the lived experiences, therefore the perspectives that someone develops from their lived experience of, honestly, I would say white men and Asian men, particularly in California. So being able to bring in different perspectives as we are shaping what the world is, the direction the world is going into, those algorithms are based on your perspective. If you think this is how life is, and this is something that, growing up, I only ever ate, I'm going to say something that it's been interesting, sitting around in a couple of different coalitions, and we'll do like those icebergs at the beginning, and somebody will ask, okay, say your name, and then what's your favorite thing you're looking forward to at Thanksgiving. I remember just doing this one in November somewhere, and it was very interesting because there seemed to be like a lot of the Black women said they were looking for either collard greens or baked. They made macaroni and cheese, right? And then a lot of the Caucasians would say they were looking forward to like a green bean casserole, or and then the whole difference between sweet potato pie and pumpkin pie, right? And so if you're building in algorithms that are just saying like, I'm looking for someone, do you like pumpkin pie? But you don't even think to say, do you like sweet potato pie? You have, whether consciously or unconsciously, subconsciously, you have baked in something. No pun intended. You have baked in something that is going to automatically exclude a group of people based off of their lived experience. And so you have different people with different perspectives. I'll say, oh, we need to make sure we ask about sweet potato pie. Oh, we also need to make sure we ask about pumpkin pie. We need to ask about green casserole. So having all those different perspectives really will benefit companies, organizations, and ultimately society, so that we don't have as limited of a perspective in technology as is being built.
Jake, your shameless plug, and then we'll get into artificial intelligence.
Sure. So we mentioned massive here before. I guess I should throw out that I was a past participant at the science fair. I grew up in DeSoto, Missouri, and went to the fair. They sent me to the International Science Fair twice. Great experience. Also had the opportunity to go to space camp as a result. So that
I
was
also went to space.
awesome.
Change seeds.
Wow.
I feel like I'm a barrier.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and so a lot of things happen for me as a result of that science fair. I got my first job from there, especially as a result. And so long and short of it is I've been on the board for almost 100 now, and I'm now leading other organizations like with First Robotics. I'm a mentor for the DeSoto high school team, and really enjoying that. And so anyway, that's the kind of work that I'm up to recently.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So, what is artificial intelligence in its simplest form?
I'll go on this one since you asked the simplest one. It's really what you alluded to earlier, that not everything has to be explicitly told to technology, but once technology is able to learn from what is being told previously and start to make either some references or implicitly something based off of past input or outcomes.
One explanation I might give is that it is typically an algorithm that's based foundationally on math and very high levels of math. Insert through a PDF document. And the math behind that is a lot more able to pixels picture and interpret let our math what it is.
I'll also say that give an example of a computer being able to figure that out with the rest. So we're trying to take the example and kind of different assets within the workspace. So a lot of people take AI and then talk about how we're trying to go to more like project process or that might be able to process payroll for utilities. We can have doing much more valuable work for me if we can just program computers to say, okay, people, let's turn in something that all these you should just be able to, the computer should just be able to process all of this data and figure out visualize what necessary thing. We should be able to do things, and it was honestly an almost every time. Instead of having to bring the person in.
So,
really thinking for themselves now, not only dependent on solicits.
I want AI is a good thing.
Use correctly, responsibly, and with ways.
And I'll just say this, artificial intelligence is fantastic at processing data, horrible at being abstract. It does not know how to correlate whatever it is you go to do. So, for instance, when I was driving here today, there's a little bit of AI that's implemented in whenever you open up a Google map and you're trying to drive somewhere. It'll give you one set of directions, but for instance, I may know that Kings Highway is packed at a particular time because an accident happened and some other things are going on. Even though sometimes the AI will pick that up, sometimes not as quickly as we would like. So I would know based off of maybe looking around in my surroundings or seeing a couple of flashing lights somewhere to divert and reroute and maybe take an alternate route right away. Whereas the AI might not pick it up until, its algorithm says, okay, after so many minutes, then you need to reevaluate and see how traffic is flowing.
So let me and I'm going to get to the conversation Jake and I had on the phone. There should be a human checking the AI. Because in the instance you gave, and I was thinking of some others in my head, if there is not that sort of person that is checking to make sure that this is right, it goes awry very quickly, based in part on, I'll go all the way back, the code that it was given, which then resulted in the algorithm that the artificial intelligence is based on.
I mean, the perfect example is autocorrect. Autocorrect.
No, that's really not a good example.
No. It's the,
Right, how it doesn't do what you want it to do. That's not what I was trying to say.
Yeah, a perfect example is autocorrect in that you need a human every single time. How many times have we typed something and it predicts a word that we're just like, that is not the word that I was trying to type. Right. You have no clue because it's not thinking abstractly. It's not trying to figure out what am I saying to Trina when I'm messaging her real quick and I'm maybe trying to say the F word or something like that.
Right. You keep saying duck.
It keeps saying duck. And you're like, no, I'm not trying to say duck. Right. Not the context of it, because it can't think abstractly. It can't understand what I'm trying to relate to her. And all it is, but we feed it as examples, which is if I press these certain keys on this phone or this machine, then the next best guess as to what type of word I'm entering in, it's going to give me. So yeah, always you need it for that. I think I had shopping recommendations. We've all been like on the Amazons or whatever, and they recommend something, and you're just like, I would never buy more than one toilet seat.
Yeah. Why I'm done with that for the year. So yeah. The conversation that we had to do with people applying for jobs online.
Sure.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, we also talked a little bit about video too. But
right.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, what we have to be concerned about is that ultimately people are involved in developing these computer programming algorithms and ultimately feeding the training sets into artificial intelligence. And those people need to be concerned about mitigating potential sources of bias. And that can come from a number of different...
and it's both intentional and unintentional. Mm-hmm. And I would argue primarily somewhat unintentional.
Right. I mean, facial recognition is a very popular thing right now. There's a lot of literature talking about the sources of bias and potential means of mitigation. And again, some of these are intentional, and a lot of which I would argue are probably unintentional. But maybe from the perspective only if they're only training with a particular data set. And if that is, matching their own demographics and they're not looking for the broader audience, then it's not going to be as accurate for, outside of that training set.
When we talk about this, so to some degree, each of you, I want to go all the way back again to code. Mm-hmm. Is the coding the issue? Obviously the person doing the coding, but how can coding end up being... No. I said that wrong. How can... Let me finish, because I think I'm going to be wrong again. How can a particular code have a bias? Which isn't the right way to say it, but...
So I think coding is not the issue. Remembering, coding is just a language. It's how you use the coding in algorithms. So it's the algorithms that are where you can run into problems if you're not thinking, if you're not getting input from a lot of different perspectives and create. Because even when I think about coders, they're not necessarily the one. They are getting requirements and specs from someone else who said, this is what I want this to do ultimately. Mm-hmm. And they just use what they have available to them, whether it's Python or Java, whatever language they have. They're just making that language do what you've asked. It's really defining the requirements that then influence what a coder is doing. And then if the coder might not have kind of the breadth of perspective to say, wait, I need to question this person on, do you also mean to make sure you do this too, or that's going to have unintended consequences, or
because I may not have the ability.
It's not the language itself.
I may not have the ability to push back because of my job security. I can't say, oh, by the way.
And some people go in with that perspective of, all I do is you tell me what to do, and I'm going to write this code. They're not even necessarily thinking.
So you're speaking to me because my background is in systems engineering, which is all about defining good requirements from a high level all the way down to the individual components. And so, from my perspective, in the vein of requirements, it's that so often we fail to define mitigating bias as a good requirement. Because let's take, for example, any company that's doing some kind of artificial intelligence facial recognition. Their goal is to sell a product that is able to detect at a certain accuracy rate. It is not, there is not a requirement often listed for things like mitigate and reduce bias. And if they don't include that, they're not going to update it and eliminate it. So that's the sort of change in mindset that we as engineers and coders, et cetera, need to have when we're entering into these projects from the start, is to make sure that we're addressing that.
Now, unfortunately, it's always whenever a lawsuit comes out, that's when the work is being done. Like even if I go to certain bathrooms and I try to do just the automatic hand washing station, I will have to rub my hands a few times across it because I found out that sometimes people use the Fitzpatrick scale to actually measure what kind of skin colors the sensors will pick up through UV. So
perfect.
Yeah. So what they found out recently, especially with autonomous driving, is that there weren't enough gradations between the Fitzpatrick scale, which is literally like 6 colors. So if you think about like women's foundation back in like 80s and in the early 90s, it was like 6 colors, and that was it. Well, that's based kind of loosely off of the Fitzpatrick scale of 6 different skin colors, and that was it. You gotta get to the closest one you got. So unfortunately, with autonomous driving, and you're trying to get this car to read whether or not there's a human. Well, humans are more than 6 colors, so they're not going to
anything past anything lighter than the 6 or darker than the 6.
Exactly. But we know, again, abstractly, I know when I see a human being. I could see a human being like in a costume or something like that. What if they're wearing a completely black costume?
Yeah.
And that happens a lot during, Comic-Con times and things like that. People cross the street dressed like Batman, and my autonomous car can't see that. Right. It doesn't recognize that that's a human. So then, that's where we have to kind of mitigate the bias ahead of time and try to say, what are some things that we're not thinking about? Again, you would need somebody that would say, wait a minute, we're in San Diego.
Right.
Comic-Con is happening in a few weeks. We're going to run into a lot of people because we're only looking for 6 colors to define that a human is crossing the street. So.
And in fact, women's cosmetics can be one of the factors that leads to bad facial results. Skin color as well. That's actually a physics problem. That there's less contrast in the image, and it can be more difficult to pick up on the facial features that are required for accurate detection.
Exactly.
Which, again, is an unintentional bias.
So I'm stuck. and I'm stuck because why can't AI have those places that will say, I've just eliminated. So I'll go back from it. I'll digress from it. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is saying that AI can be very disastrous for seniors trying to get in the workplace because of several different things. One is language. They're using language, I should say, using language from a previous generation, and so we're looking, detecting for specific words they don't ever show up. 2, we maybe put out because we're overqualified for a position, and we may have gotten extra education because of other things. So we didn't leap from high school to college to the master's degree. We stopped and had kids and family and everything. Never really went back. So there are a lot of reasons why Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is concerned about artificial intelligence being the place where you have to put your resume and your face and everything else. Because if I got this whole head of gray hair, they're going to look at me and go, "Oh no, no, he's way too old for this job. So,
but then that's not artificial intelligence. That's still the person behind everything. Not even the person who might have written the code. That's the person making decisions that I really don't want someone who's old. Like, I only really believe in this next generation.
You just called me old.
Seasoned. I'm with you. I have my gray hair. So,
I'm hurt. But so because I want to make sure we're clear. It's not necessary. I would argue it is the code because of who coded, but it is also the person who's feeding the coding process to say, here's what my business is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I want you to code for. And in essence, they've set the parameters, which then may lead into bias of one way, shape, or form.
I'll talk about this friend and I know, I think you might know, Stephanie Lampkin. She actually was a person who graduated from two very prominent technology-heavy universities. Tried to get a job at one of the big tech companies out in San Francisco, and was told she was not technical enough. And they would look at her resume and all of that stuff, but then they would see who she was and be like, yeah, you might need some more experience. And I mean, she's somebody that like the MIT. So I was like, I don't know how much more you want her to get. But she decided to invent this platform called Blendor, which is a recruiting platform. I do not pay for this, by the way, which is a recruiting platform that eliminates some bias. So it takes out, for instance, the name. And the loose definition of it is kind of like a Tinder thing, where it's just like it eliminates some of the things like name and picture, things like that. So the only thing that the employer sees is just the core information. And then basically the person has to kind of also agree, the applicant has to also agree that they want to have this company actually interview them. And once that connection is made, then the information is revealed to the company, all the background information about that person, so name and photo and things like that. The problem that we've had is that you can't quantify that information because it wasn't available. It would be us going to a company, to their HR, and say, how many black people have you turned down because they were black? Nobody's going to tell you that. But a system like this would be able to kind of give that information up front, and it would actually be available so that one can say, okay, well, for some reason, 98% of the African Americans that you like their resume and everything like that, but once you got their information, they never got to the interview part. Why is that? And so when we're thinking about systems like that, we see issues like that, and then there are people who are inventing things to kind of get rid of that bias. But again, it's kind of a hard road to climb. She's still been working on this for about 5 years now. So my hope is that she gets a little bit more exposure for this application that she has, and companies seriously consider using something like that to kind of help as much as possible to mitigate any bias.
I just want to make sure that we don't, because I know a lot of people are like scared of technology and scared of AI, and they like see movies like iRobot and Minority Report, and they think, okay, see, technology is about to take over. But I don't want us to look at technology and this might be controversial, but use it as a scapegoat. At the end of the day, right, things that are happening are still that there's a human being behind all of this.
Absolutely.
There's a human being that even after you've identified, oh, this is a problem, they're not coming back around and saying, let's go back and retool this or fix this. So even as I hear us discussing how this then can play out in discrimination within hiring, we shouldn't be blaming the AI or the code. We should be looking to the people, the environment, the mindsets that have both created it, and then even when it's brought to their attention. Because I think about even this application.
Yeah.
They
still
can choose not to use it.
Exactly.
Like, you still have to then have companies, organizations say, oh, I'm going to go ahead and tell my HR department to incorporate this and make sure that we are being truly equitable in how we're trying to hire folks. There are some people who will say that they want to be equitable, and they really don't. Like, it's serving their purpose to stay the way they are. So I'm always mindful of somebody being able to just now look at AI and say, okay, yep, that's the problem. And you're still not fixing the mindsets of people that are actually behind. Because computers haven't just decided they're going to be,
humans.
So, I mean, you're getting into unconscious bias and implicit bias, which is part of what I do in my consulting, is that, you also have to fix the people. Because at the end of the day, you're a human that hires other humans to do things, whether it be something on a computer or the human has to use a computer to perform a particular operation. It's still human beings. So until you get something where it's just completely computers, like you said, you still have to deal with the human beings. I know that platforms like Blender are excellent, and again, they can only help so much, but I tell people that it's kind of like an advanced bandage, but you still need antibiotics. I've forgotten about, but kind of help. You have things that you can use to bandage it up, because we know not everyone is going to be on the same page like we would like them to be when it comes to addressing problems.
The decision makers, I also just want to highlight. It's the decision makers who are telling coders or, HR departments. It's the decision makers who have to really stand up and say, I want to make sure we are writing.
It has to be a priority.
And it has to be integrated into their actual objectives.
Right. So
it can't just be mouth service.
Sure. This came from a New York Times article. I'm sorry, Los Angeles Times article. When they say an algorithm is a set of instructions that describe how to perform a certain task. We've talked about that. But that facial recognition software has been shown to have race and gender bias. Facial recognition software has been shown to have gender bias. Then it says, 5 paragraphs down, the problem was not the people, the problem was the people designed it asked to do the wrong thing. So it finally gets to that point where, and I've way too much around this issue. I am frightened by it. I'm also, as a creative director, civil rights, I am frightened by the mistakes that it makes. And I say it because I don't know what it is. But, I've read articles about disability bias and how that played out in a particular judgment that someone because we're disabled and they turned their application in online, looked wonderful, and they were ready to interview the person, but he could not be interviewed because they didn't have software. He was paraplegic, and they didn't have the software to allow him to speak into the computer. And so ultimately, because they were the hiring entity, they were supposed to do that, didn't do it. We caught him on it. And this was a national firm that was doing this. So I'm just thinking of how many other hundreds of people, 50 people, possibly didn't get hired because they had a disability.
Right.
So I am frightened by it. But what you're telling me is it's not AI. It's not necessarily the algorithm. It's the code that produces everything. And the desire of whoever the management firm company is to watch what's going on.
It ultimately comes back to priorities of the developer. So mitigating that potential bias has to be a top priority. Otherwise, it won't be baked in as a feature.
And usually what I tell people is that computers do exactly what you tell them to do. Mm-hmm. So if you put in a bias, whether it's conscious or not, it's going to do what you asked it to do. And the problem is that the computer is unbiased in itself, so it's going to do whatever that you told it to do. And again, we kind of go back into the circle, like, do we put in safeguards to try to prevent that from happening on a regular basis? Of course we do. We try to do that, but at the end of the day, we still also have to go back to humans that were the ones that programmed it in the first place and say, hey, we need other examples that put into here than the ones that you provided, so that you know that you're more inclusive of the types of operations that we want or desire for this program to run.
Like only train software on middle-aged white men. That's the only thing that's going to be good.
Exactly.
Everybody else is going to be really slow, right? And so the way to correct that as a design firm, wherever you may be, is to intentionally include by getting larger data and training on that.
It doesn't no well, it's like the organizations you all are affiliated with, but even if you get a lot of African Americans and younger people in the room, it still is the decision maker saying, this is what I want the output to look like. And if they're stuck,
They'll tell people.
Yeah.
Tell people
So there's stuff I have to say, yes, temporarily, at least they made the first step to have more diverse perspectives within the organization. Now, another thing that's probably another conversation is who is being able to advance within the organization and get to decision-making people, right? So, but at least it's kind of like we're making one step forward by opening up opportunities to more diverse perspectives within technology space. And then the next step is how do you make sure that they're not just solidly in this one place, from others that are actually see that they want having their input considered as you're looking at the directions that we get into.
Like it's a whole podcast right there.
because at the end of the day, A, you can't move on if you're not in.
Exactly.
You got to get people in the system. And number two, yeah, I might be able to change. I might be able to affect this incoming because I'm in the system. I know what I'm saying, and I can say to the person next to me who is not diverse, oh, you should add this to the code, and you get a larger sample of people, or looking at job or whatever. That might be a way to do some of that. That would be fair. Yeah.
Right, that would be fair. It's not always that way, though. As we think, the great person to talk about something, but it's going to have a direct impact on a particular company that they still be doing that. So, I might share with their coworker, oh, you're working as part of the code. This should probably be considered. And they follow the requirements that came then there.
And I will also say this, I am basically, for anybody who actually hears me, so I went to the State Health Spaces and I talked to Jerry Gillian, and I believe he was one of the folks for Apollo 11. And he said, in front of everyone, he said, the reason why we work so well with Apollo 11 is that every time the training ever happened, we set up them before and we made decisions together. And I think when you look at the algorithms and all that, people on the ground be a little bit more autonomous to making decisions. Then maybe some of the things that haven't come out, some of the lawsuits that have gone unavoided, if we would have at least let them have a little bit more to say, this is bad, we need to make these decisions. This might work. So I got away from him and I was like, you did something that was considered impossible. Then so I'm going to probably leave you as far as how to actually work and not something that's impossible.
First, important thing that help benefit a lot of the issues, but ultimately there is a whole problem within the industry.
Yeah.
Your of disability being something that also, and I can't believe I'm saying this, walked in, right? Maybe if done properly and responsibly, the government should be regulating what is really inside rooms, because that in addition to people having to do more regulation around technology, that would have an impact. That's still people in government, and it might be regulated in a way that at a counter.
Yeah, if you can somehow require mitigating those potential biases, that's one way to influence the design.
Right.
But if it's never a requirement.
So one of the things we after Facebook about was the algorithm literally kind of cut out African Americans in the home industry, and they said, no, we clearly see if I'm on Facebook and I'm a black male, and take your computer and you're a white male, we see different things on Facebook, and some of that is a bias that is discriminatory. So the government is some of that. It's hard to do some of that because you only know what the output is. I only know you discriminated when 5 seasoned candidates didn't get hired for a job versus a younger, somewhat less qualified individual. You could tell that there was something in the algorithm, I'll say it that way, that that eliminated these people versus this one. So it's always on the back. It's unfortunately normally on the back and not the front end.
It could be. Once again, I'm not trying to get to a Big Brother state, but it could be similar to how you do have to do like inspections for ADA. You have to, before you can say, I'm going to do something, open a school or start a company, someone has to come in and make sure you have elevators or there's multiple floors, that, you know, those elevators are inspected to make sure that they will do what they need to do. If there were inspections sort of, you know, periodically of code that is used, particularly by major corporations. I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out how we can, because this is happening all fast. I mean, and I think that's part of even what the government is realizing now about, as they're now trying to come in and say, oh, we need to have more regulations. They looked up and realized that so much change in the last decade alone that we're so behind the curve. So,
Kind of example where maybe there's the government mandate that says you have to verify your claims of accuracy on a broader sample set. Because I think the problem is that some countries use adverse things, right? And so that's how you get the results.
So over time, I'll give each of you a shameless plug, starting with Jake and going through.
Gosh, yeah, so thanks for having me, Jake Bertenstein, currently volunteering with the Mastodon Fair and for robotics.
And thank you also, Trina Clark James with Empower, that's N as in Nancy, POWER, and this, if you're really excited about this conversation, I just encourage everyone to, whether you consider yourself a technologist or not, to be a part of conversations about how technology is developing and changing the way society is.
Thank you. Oh, address of Empower.
Empower is, so our website is empower.org, POWER.org, and here in St. Louis, we're at the in the Henry Gibbons Admin Building on the campus of Harris State University, as well as in the William J. Harrison Educational Center, part of the St. Louis Community College Forest Park campus that is across the street from John High School.
On Cass, right?
On Cass, yes. 3140 Cass.
LaShawna Lewis, Lewis Consulting. It's exactly like it sounds, LMLEWIS.com. Also a spokesperson for Launch Code, whether intentional or not, it usually always happens. And if you want to learn more information about Launch Code, the website is launchcode.org.
And location?
Location on Launch Code is on the corner of Euclid and Delmar. That's where the Midcore Center is. And the location of Lewis Consulting is I'm working out of the T-Rex building downtown at 9th and Washington.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank Thank you.